Welcome to Navigating Your Health today. It is our privilege to introduce to you Dr. Deepak Shrivastava. Dr. Shrivastava comes to us with a wealth of knowledge in pulmonology, respirology, gerontology, internal medicine, sleep medicine, and physiology. Today he will be sharing with us how to navigate your healthcare while sheltering in place.
Welcome to today's webinar, Shelter in Place and Your Health. I'm Deepak Shrivastava. Our objectives will discuss what happens when we are in a state where we are confined to our home for a period of time, although this period may be shorter. We'll talk about exercise and physical inactivity, dietary changes and alcohol consumption, sleep irregularities and napping, and the importance of maintaining regular schedule, as well as the overall impact on our health. In 2008, a new branch of the physiology began, and it was termed inactivity physiology. You can imagine that how important it was. It was published in Current Cardiovascular Risk in July 2008. And there are a number of studies, molecular biology and medical chemistry, which show that the exercise and physical inactivity changes the body system. Of course, the exercise or positively and physical inactivity negatively. There are also genetic association studies which show that there are very different genomic regions present which are different for each physical activity behavioral phenotype. So we can all exercise but may have more benefit with one type of exercise versus the other. There are hundreds of genes and molecular processes that are impaired by the physical inactivity. And that is very, very important. And towards the middle of the talk, we'll talk a little more about that. There is something called the specificity principle, and that means that the body responds to different physical activity patterns in very different and unique ways. And we have to find out what our beneficial patterns are. Tom Jefferson said, the third president of the United States, that a strong body makes the mind strong. Well, he was correct. Humans are not programmed to be physically inactive. We sleep for 8 hours and are awake for 16 hours, and that 16 hours is supposed to be physically active. If we are inactive, then a condition can develop in a short period of time called disuse syndrome. Following the Darwin's theory of evolution, what Darwin named natural selection, later Herbert, one of his colleagues, Spencer, called it survival of the fittest, that Darwin later adopted. And what that means, it never made much sense to me in the current situation, especially in terms of confinement to home and shelter in place. Who lives and who dies? How resilient we humans are. Who is able to take the physical challenge and threat that we come across in our daily lives is more important today than it ever used to be. There is a group that got together, and they are called Lancet Physical Activity Series Working Group in 2012. They looked at the physical activity levels internationally. And it turns out, unfortunately, that about 60% of the world population does not get involved in the exercise as they should. They found that 6% of the coronary heart disease, 7% of the diabetes type 2, the breast cancer 10%, colon cancer 10%, and all-cause premature deaths of 9% were attributed to lack of physical activity. Let's go over some of the scientific information here. And my goal is to show you some of the data in not very deep details so that it doesn't get boring, but to prove that for a long time we've been looking at it and we fully understand the value of the physical inactivity. Let's look at the vascular function first. Recently, the authors of this particular study looked at the only few days of physical inactivity, and few days could be as short as 5 days and as long as could be a few weeks, can be really detrimental to the vascular function, we realized that the blood vessels provide blood to all over the body. And vascular function and physical inactivity by itself is independent risk factor for the cardiovascular disease. So traditional risk factors that we know of, insulin resistance, abnormal cholesterol values, hypertension, increased inflammation in the body, they all do not really completely account for the worst cardiovascular outcomes. So there is something else, and that something else turned out to be the physical activity. Response to the exercise and inactivity results in direct and opposing effect to the vasculature. As I said, that exercise will be positive effect and inactive will be negative effect. Here, this study was done in UCSF in 2014. It's a very interesting scientific study, and I would like to bring your attention to this here. This is the flow-mediated dilatation. Our blood vessels are elastic, and they dilate and constrict. When we are young, that dilation is significant, and I would call it normal. And as we age, the blood vessels begin to stiffen and dilation is less. Let's look at what happens. These authors looked at the group of subjects, and then they measured their flow-mediated dilation here that turned out to be average of about 11.1% or so in people who were otherwise active. Then they put them on the bed rest and only for 5 days. And you can see that the activity, the dilation went down to about 2%. So clearly within 5 days of time, the vascular system showed more resistance to the blood flow and less dilation. We call it pulse pressure. The normal pulse pressure is the difference between your high blood pressure, the higher systolic blood pressure, 120, the diastolic is 80, so 40. During exercise, this pulse pressure can actually go up to 100 and keep the blood vessels more and more elastic. So there is quantifiable impairment in the vascular reactivity. The arterial wall stiffens. There are changes in the levels of the inflammatory metabolites, and it leads to a deconditioning effect. There are studies that show that the hospitalized patients and post-operative patients have limited physical activity, and their vascular healing is slow. And similar effects can be seen in the normal people if they are active for a short period of time. In 2008, this group also looked at the physical inactivity that caused death of 5.3 million people out of the total 57 million deaths that occurred worldwide in 1 year. This was a landmark study, and I would like to spend a little time in diabetologia in 2018. Short-term decreased physical activity with increased sedentary behavior causes metabolic derangement. So we saw the vascular problems that come with inactivity, but here's the metabolic problems that come along. They took young people with healthy weight and physically active, defined by that they were walking 10,000 steps per day. And then they took the baseline measurements of their blood vessel health, body composition, and blood sugar control. These people were asked to become inactive for 2 weeks. That means their activity was limited to 1,500 steps per day. As we saw, one of the earliest signs of cardiovascular risk is reduced functional dilatory capacity that we saw in last slide. In 2 weeks of physical inactivity, their body fat, waist size, fitness, and diabetes markers, liver fat, and insulin sensitivity all became abnormal. So here in this cartoon, you can see this cohort of subjects was walking 10,000 steps in baseline, and then they were asked to rest or reduce their activity to 1,500 steps, which I think in time-wise, I would like to say that this is shelter-in-place situation, that we are confined to home and are unable to walk those distances. And once the activity was resumed, the group was studied again. So what's happening here in this activity, when somebody is physically active, glucose is utilized by the muscles, and liver triglycerides, which are part of the cholesterol system, are low, and the adipose tissue, the fat tissue, that goes down. And people are sensitive to insulin, so the glucose responds to the insulin, and they are metabolically healthy. On this second cartoon here, the person is sedentary, their muscle mass is increasing, they are unable to utilize the glucose, and therefore the liver has higher levels of triglyceride and increase in the adipose tissue. The glucose does not respond to the insulin, and that is called the insulin resistance and development of the metabolic syndrome. And please realize that this all happened in their study within 2 weeks' time. A very busy slide. I just wanted to point out that here is the body mass index, weight circumference, glucose metabolism, lipid profile, body composition, and cardiorespiratory fitness parameters in this cohort before the inactivity, during the activity, and after the activity were documented. So this condition can appear within 5 to 10 to 14 days because of the reduced physical activity. Well, good news is the health returns to normal once you resume your activity. Interestingly, within 2 weeks, the cardiovascular function decreased by about 2%, which we have seen repeatedly in many other studies. So we should like to move more, as even small and subtle changes can make a big difference overall in our health during the shelter-in-place like activity. There is a condition called sarcopenia. That's muscle weakness and atrophy of the muscle. Again, rather than going into detail, I'd like to bring your attention to habitual physical activity decline. As the physical activity declines, and here is on the x-axis is age in years, and here is the healthy muscle that you can see the cross-sectional area of the muscle, normal decline would follow the gray line. However, when these are periods of inactivity, even short period of inactivity, there is a dip in this graph. And once the activity goes down, this decline continues. So here are like 3 declines, and you can see the muscle has lost a lot of its mass and is almost atrophied. People thought that it is probably because of the decreased protein synthesis, and probably protein metabolism in the body has something to do with it. So they started looking at the protein nitrogen balance in people who were active and inactive. So first 2 graphics here are with the nitrogen balance, and we like to see the positive nitrogen balance. Up here, only few were positive nitrogen balance, other were probably sedentary and were not in good nitrogen balance. However, once this group, the subject group, was asked to go for bed rest for 1 to 5 days and 6 to 10 days, you can easily appreciate here that the nitrogen balance became more negative as a reflection of loss of muscle mass and loss of muscle synthesis. These people also reduced their muscle fibers, the red muscle fibers, which provide the endurance to the muscle. So we think that protein is important, and we believe that protein undernutrition is very, very common. So protein may have something to do with it. Well, that confounder was tested again in 2014 with a group that published their data in Journal of Nutrition. And you can see that they looked at the quadriceps. The leg muscles have a lot of problems because large muscle mass, so they begin to lose muscle mass faster. So their cross-sectional area in the controls, and this is the group which was given a protein diet. And then they also looked at the single leg repeated movements of the muscle. So in the control group and the group that was given protein, 20 grams per kilogram protein diet. And you can see before the inactivity period and after the activity period, universally, regardless, even in controls and in people who were inactive, you can see that despite the protein diet, they had the loss of the muscle power and strength, as well as muscle cross-sectional area, that is the muscle mass. So even short successive periods of muscle disuse can be instrumental in the loss of the muscle mass, and that brings in weakness. If you are elderly, you are prone to fall and other problems. Even 5 days of immobilization cause significant muscle atrophy in the legs. And maximal leg muscle strength decrease following immobilization in both the protein supplemental group and the controls. So even a small alteration in daily living can have significant impact on the health, positively and negatively, as I repeatedly said. And during this time, when we are in confinement, and we don't know how long we will be in confinement, We can take a 10-minute walk. We can walk around the house. Even standing and walking on hourly basis makes big difference. If you happen to go out for your essential market supplies, etc., park your car at the back of the supermarket or wherever you go so that you can get some more steps in. In this cartoon here, I'd like to talk about the importance of sleep, because sleep is an integral part of our daily life. Days are uncertain, we are anxious, and we don't even know what quality of sleep we will get, because there are stressors not only related to the disease, but related to the job, the finances, and other things. In this cartoon, I wanted to show that the body has different clocks. Every cell in the body has its own intrinsic clock. All the tissues, therefore, have intrinsic clock, and all the systems. Here in this cartoon here, there is a clock in the brain. We call it the master clock, suprachiasmatic nucleus. And in the next cartoon, I'll show you that what resets it every day. But there are independent clocks in the cardiac system, liver, pancreas, spleen, gut, vascular system, you name it. Every system has their own clock. And the importance is that all these clocks have to be aligned with each other, and the master clock in the brain does that, it aligns them. In this cartoon here, you can see the light of the day, which is the sunshine here, goes through the eyes, and then it resets the master clock, which in turn resets all the other clocks that you can see: the adrenal glands, thyroid gland, heart, pancreas, liver, fat, muscles, gut, etc. So there is very different metabolism during the daytime as opposed to the nighttime. Eating, sleeping, and exercise. These are the three major factors which affect our health. So sleep becomes extremely important in this context of the circadian rhythm, or the master clock, which controls the rest of the clocks in the body. In 2017, three American scientists, Michael Young, Jeffrey Hall, and Michael Rosbash, won the Nobel Prize for their discovery of the molecular clock. They worked for 30 years or longer in order to accomplish this, but finally, now we understand the genetic makeup and how exactly the system works is the work of these three gentlemen that we owe a lot of gratitude. I'd like to talk about the nap, because when you are home, you feel like taking nap, especially if you had a poor night sleep. A good quality nap will be somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes, because if you sleep longer, you will actually get into the slow sleep or the more restorative sleep and REM sleep, and then that will affect your nighttime sleep. So you really want to take that original power nap, and really don't want to take a long nap despite the fact that you're home or working from the home. Let's talk about diet. What happens when we are home most of the time, we'll actually reach for the food which are high in carbohydrates, sugars, and high in fats. What we need to do when we are in this sort of situation where we are not moving around, not doing much exercise, etc., we got to reduce our salt. We have to eliminate the trans fatty acids. What are trans fatty acids? These are the oils that we fry the food, and the baked goods, they have the trans fatty acids. Why? Because these increase the risk of the heart disease by 21% and death by almost 30%. So these are not the best foods to eat. Also reduce the saturated fat. What is saturated fat? Is something like coconut oil. So anything that upon cooling becomes solid, as opposed to, let's say, olive oil, which you can cool it, but it will not become solid, is saturated fat, and it does have a similar effect. It's a good idea during this time to limit your free sugars, increase the fruits and vegetables, and try to accomplish healthy weight, and continue your physical activity, as we said earlier. Important thing is when you go for groceries, farmer markets are considered essential services, and they are allowed to be open in this crisis. The importance is that the food is fresher because it travels the shorter distance and touches fewer hands. There are in farmer markets, at least in United States, there are washing stations and the sanitizers, so clean your house. And people come and go there, so it's a fresh air, open air, you are not inside a large store. Wipe whatever you can wipe and dispose of the paper bags that you bring home. Wipe and scrub plastic boxes and cans before opening them or putting them away in the refrigerator. Wash the vegetables and avoid the frozen foods. The science behind here is about the frozen food is that the coronavirus, not the COVID new virus, but the other coronaviruses have been found in the frozen food, which has been frozen for 2 years. Alcohol. This is very interesting. I was driving to work today and listening to the news channel, and the CEO of a company they called Backtrack came on the radio and said that they have been studying the alcohol consumption pattern of people during the shelter-in-place days. And this study was done around San Francisco Bay Area as well as in San Diego. And they found that during the period of shelter in place in Bay Area, where it was the first area to go in shelter in place order, there is 42% increase in the alcohol consumption. That is just too much. And similar data is coming out of the rest of the country. So this is very interesting. When you are home, you will feel like if you drink, you will drink. But there are other drinks that people have, the caffeine or the tea or other drinks. Oh, you have to watch out for that. You got to control the rate of consumption to allow your liver to metabolize alcohol. Increase in alcohol consumption increases the likelihood of violence. There is a crisis domestic violence website now by the government where one can call and talk to the people who will help. But the data says that 1 in 4 females, women, and 1 in 7 men are subject of the domestic violence. So something to think about. I suggest have 1 non-alcoholic drink between each alcoholic drink, so that will cut your drinking right there by 50% at least, and select the light version if the choice is there, because that gives you less number of calories. Always eat something, don't drink on an empty stomach. So what is the overall impact on the health? Deconditioning, as I have showed you with the vascular studies, the muscle endurance studies, is the natural outcome of inactivity. Changes in blood pressure, I assume that blood pressures will go up due to lack of exercise, anxiety, and so on. Changes in blood sugar, again, the bias is that the blood sugar will be uncontrolled. Body weight will be rising, increasing. Increased risk of sleep apnea because of the increased body weight and other problems. And then increased risk of cardiovascular event, either during the period of confinement or afterwards. And then there are, of course, significant negative changes in immune response due to the nutritional and all of the above problem, including inactivity. So I would like to summarize that 14 days of inactivity could have detrimental effect on the cardiovascular system. You have to have deliberate plans to prevent the deterioration in your health, no matter how you feel about that. You have to come up with your own plan. Exercise is not an option. It's mandatory to keep yourself healthy. Choose your diet carefully. Moderation and discretion must guide your alcohol consumption. And I cannot further underscore the value of sleep that controls our mental and physical health. Ladies and gentlemen, knowledge is power. I empowered you with this webinar, and I hope that you will use it to your benefit. Thank you very much. I'll be back again soon. Thank you. I'd like to recommend that people are watching just too much television, and there's continuously bad news, which is very stressful. And people are already having psychological problems, and there are now support systems set up where people can have some psychological, psychiatric help. Of course, the anxiety levels are high, stress is high, people will be depressed, they are losing their jobs. They don't know what the future is going to be. They will lose their properties, houses, despite the fact that every government around the world is trying to protect people, but the long-term effects are incredible, and I'm sure that day will come that we all will come through and recover from this calamity. It's going to be longer than people think. That's one thing. But what I'm afraid of is really because when the world opens, we will have a flurry of patients who are sitting home and getting sicker, have no access to the healthcare because they are afraid to go to the hospitals, and services are closed. They are not available. Their doctor's offices are closed. Dentist offices are closed. So there is nobody helping these people. They are at the God's mercy right now. And when the world opens again, they will be going in to seek care in a completely depleted system of any resources. So this is going to be a major rehabilitation time. So at this time, again, the recommendation is try to keep the good health as much as no pain, no gain is the way to go right now. To get out there, walk around the house, find your own exercise, what suits you, and do it frequently. It's not only I have done 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes of exercise in the morning. The studies show that even 45 minutes of exercise in the morning will actually lose all its beneficial effects in next 14 to 15 hours of inactivity. The recommendation is get up and don't sit. Sitting and laying down is considered to be the most detrimental of all. So stand up. If you cannot walk, at least stand. That is really important.
This episode was brought to you by Julia Worrell, the Sleep RN, and Carrie Ibbotson, Oral Health Coach. We are here for you, helping you navigate your health today. Thanks for listening. Please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions or concerns